Hello and welcome on in, everybody. Good to see you. What's going on? My name is Sam Peterson. I'm going to be your host for today's Photoshop challenge. For today's challenge, we are doing a double exposure effect. So before we get into that, I just want to say hi to everyone in chat. Perva, our moderator, Way to Cuff, Carol, what's going on, everybody? Welcome on in. So let me show you what we're going to be doing today. I want to show you kind of the effect that we're getting into. So this is the starter file. You should be able to get that from the description um, in the from the link in the description. There we go. But let me show you the effect we're going to be creating, what it's going to kind of look like. If we have time today, I want to do two different variations of this, but we got a grayscale one, a little bit more of a nature theme, and then we have this kind of colorized city one. So two different methods we can play around with. Same technique, but just a little bit of a different look. So let me show you how we're going to get started with that. So if you have the starter file, you'll have this image along with some assets. And what we're going to do is first mask out this figure. So I want to duplicate the background with Controller Command J, and we have a copy here. And what I want to do is I'm going to grab my quick selection tool and I'm going to do select subject. So we're going to mask this out. And then after we mask this, we can go into select mask. And I just want to refine the hair a little bit. So I'm going to take my refine edge brush tool over here on the left. And I know we need some edges around the hair to be kind of cleaned up. So I'm just going to trace around the hair. Just kind of scrub where it's should have a little bit of the background showing through. That looks good. I think we lost a little bit of her eyelash. There we go, we got that back. Let me see, there's these little gap between her fingers. I'll get those real quick. And I think that looks pretty good. So let's accept that, click OK down at the bottom. And we'll go ahead and mask that out. So if I create a background, I'm going to do Controller Command Shift N for a new layer. Just call this BG for background. And I'm actually going to color pick from the background and just fill it in with the same thing. So there we have our cutout image separated from the background, which is exactly what I want. What's going on, everyone else? I want to say hey to Frank. I saw Umacorn, Afrosia, Ted. What's going on, Ted? Good to see you, Rick. General Kenobi, the one and only. Clarissa. Hey, everybody. Welcome on in. All right, so the next step, we masked it. Let's desaturate this. So I'm actually going to create a copy of this. I want to apply my mask, and that'll become necessary later. So I'm just going to duplicate it with Controller Command J. Apply my mask, right-click the mask and do Apply Layer Mask. Now we just have this separate, because we'll be masking this separately, so we want a whole different mask for that. Let's see here. Make sure I didn't forget anything. Yeah, so we got a layer, new adjustment layer, and we'll go to Hue and Saturation. Go ahead and right-click that, do Create Clipping Mask. So we're clipping that Hue and Saturation layer to this figure, and we're just going to desaturate it fully. We're going for the grayscale image for this particular design. So what I want to do is I want to clip something to this. Exit this. I'm actually going to flip my canvas. I often flip my canvas. I'm not flipping the actual canvas. I'm going to View, Flip Horizontal, so it's just flipping the view, but I do that often, if anyone's wondering how I do that. All right, let's get one of our assets here for the double exposure effect. I'm going to go into my asset folder, and I'm going to pull out this image. I will be cropping this later, so I might want to... I'm going to take all these assets and I'm just going to right click them, do convert to smart object for everyone. Just really quickly convert them all to smart objects separately. And that way, I'm going to need to do that eventually, but I'll show you when we're cropping it. We don't want to crop those images out, so I'll probably have to make them smaller to avoid the crop. But let's move on to the next step first, before we get into that. I'm going to duplicate. Controller Command J. I like to have my assets in the folder protected, so I'm just leaving the asset folder separate, and I just duplicated the asset I need and brought it down. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click this, do create clipping mask, and clip it to my figure here. I'm also going to desaturate it a bit and try to arrange this in the image in the way that I would want it. I can actually release my clipping mask and kind of visualize where the treetop will be. I do want the treetop breaking the silhouette a little bit. So something like that I think is pretty good. Maybe we'll scale it up a bit. Something like that. That looks pretty good to me. I'm going to press enter to confirm that, and then I'm going to right click that and do create clipping mask. So now we have it clipped in, and I'm going to put the opacity back. That was just to visualize it a little bit easier. From here, I'm going to go ahead and do Controller Command U. Since this is a smart object, we don't need an adjustment layer. I can just do Controller Command U, which is the hotkey for hue and saturation, and I'm going to desaturate that fully. And then what I want to do from here is I want to expand the canvas. I want to make sure my assets here are not going to be outside the canvas. So I'm going to scale these all down just to save them. Since they're smart objects, they won't lose any resolution. But just since we're going to crop it, I'm pressing C for crop, just to give us a little bit of overhead here. I think that looks pretty good. That should be enough for the treetop. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and go to my background layer, get my fill bucket over here on the left-hand side. G is the hotkey for that. And I'm going to color pick my background and just fill that in right there. So that looks good to me. Okay, so what I want to do next is mask out some of this tree layer. So we have our tree layer. I could even call this trees, just to keep it organized here. And I'm going to click the little mask button down at the bottom. This way, I can paint with black. I have that mask selected that I just created, and I can paint with black with a soft round brush. I'm using this big soft round brush. It's just an airbrush, default soft round. And I'm just going to paint in the areas of the face that I want. If you want a more gradual, clean gradation, I recommend using, especially if you're using a mouse, I recommend using a lower flow and a larger brush size. You'll get a smoother gradient that way. I'm using a tablet, so I can be a little bit more precise. I don't have to mess with the flow as much. But I'm just going to mask in part of the hair to blend in. I think I want the ear there. Kind of want like a smooth transition between it. Something like that looks pretty good to me. And then from here, let's see. I think that looks pretty good. What I might want to do is go over to the portrait. I'll actually name this portrait. Just to keep it organized once again, I'm going to create a mask for that. So down at the bottom of the layers panel, you'll see this little add to layer mask square or rectangle button. Click that, add a new layer mask. And what I might want to do is just blend the edge of the head a little bit, just to get rid of that seam. We'll kind of adjust this a bit later. Now you can see I'm not masking out the trees. I'm just going to leave them as is. For this method, I think this is actually going to work pretty well. But if you are going to try to mask this image, if you did need to mask trees or something like this, I just want to show you one method that you can use for that. On a previous challenge, we went over selections. Selections 101. It was Monday's challenge. Well, I would recommend using a channels selection. If you guys remember, we did a little bit of a channels selection method. And basically what you do is you just go through, you go into channels, you have red, green, and blue, and you look for the one with the most contrast. I see blue has the most contrast, so I will use that. I will click and drag it down to this plus icon at the bottom of the layers panel to duplicate it. And then from here, what I can do is I can do Control or Command I while selecting that channel, the copy, and it'll invert it. So from here, you can do something like the burn tool, and you can try to make this black here, this dark area, completely black. Now I have the shadows selected. The range is on shadows. The exposure is 16. That's basically the strength of it. I like to keep it kind of low to make it gradual. But you can just quickly kind of paint over that area to make it more completely black. And then I can go ahead and control click that to select it and then mask it out, the mask button. From here, I might want to create a new adjustment layer for a levels adjustment. Clip that to my layer and then just boost up the darks a little bit. That should work pretty well. I'll merge those together, Control A, Control C, and paste it over here just so you can see. But if we desaturate this, we have this nice mask that works pretty well. That's just a heads up if you run into an instance where you need to mask it out. I'm not actually going to be doing that for this method, but I just wanted to show you. All right, let's move on from here. So we got our trees masked. Let me see where we are. Okay. So what I want to do is get the top of the trees. Because these are clipped to the head, it's not going to be showing anything outside of that mask. The portrait is the mask, so it can't go outside of the confines of the head. So what I want to do is I actually want to take our tree layer that we have here clipped, do Control or Command J to duplicate it, and then delete that layer mask on this duplicate. So I'm going to right click the layer mask, delete layer mask. From here, I'm going to create a new mask down at the bottom. Let's create a new mask, and I'm going to do Alt or Command backspace to fill it in with the current color, which is black. So I basically just did that as a hotkey to fill the entire mask in with black. From here, I can select white to reveal it, press B for my brush, and just paint in the top here. Now, if we're getting a little bit of that mask, since we didn't mask these trees out, I'm just kind of blending it into the background. I could try taking, instead of my burn tool, I could try taking my dodge tool. Let's see here. Oh, I do need to rasterize that, by the way. So make sure you're not doing the dodge tool in the mask. I want to click my layer, and when I try to paint on it with the dodge tool, it'll say it's a smart object, it needs to be rasterized. I'll say okay. And then I can paint over that fringe area and kind of get a nice blend. All right, so now we kind of have the top of our image. I think that looks pretty good. I just want to check the chat, make sure there's no questions I'm missing. I'll be re-watching this. Yeah, there's a lot of steps in this one. So hopefully, if you guys miss anything or if I'm going too fast or anything like that, you can just re-watch it and hopefully catch those. And of course, I'll be in the Discord. If anyone has questions with any of these, I'm always available in the Discord. Definitely tag me. Feel free to ask me questions. All right, let's go into the next part. So what I want to do next is bring in the second tree image. So I'm going to go into my assets. Let's get rid of these. I have this second tree image. I'm going to copy it, drag it out of my assets folder. Just keeping my assets folder separate in case I need them again in the future. This is already a smart object, so we're good there. And I think what I'm gonna want to do is position it. Just gonna flip it around. Press enter. I'm using the move tool, by the way, going near the corners to rotate it. You can hold on shift to do it in increments. Enter to confirm. I'm gonna drag it below my tree top layer. That was the layer that was just there. I'll name that tree tops. And then I will clip this second trees. Put 2 trees. Clip that and position that where I want it. So we'll play around with this real quick. I might scale this up quite a bit. Get something like that. I think that looks pretty good. Press enter. Now from here, I do want to desaturate this, so I'm going to do Control U again. And since it's a smart object, it'll retain this information in case we need to change it. You'll see its smart filters are now available for that layer. And I'm going to just mask it out. So I'm going to create a mask on this. As you can see, this double exposure effect is a lot of masking. That's primarily what it is. Let's see here. Oh, I have white selected. I need black selected to conceal. To conceal the effect. I want her neck kind of visible, so I'm going to do that. Go in here. Might kind of soften up that edge. And then what I'll probably do is go down to the portrait image, go to its mask, and actually mask out a little bit of the portrait. I kind of want this to fade near the bottom. Could even fade like that just to get kind of this clear blend. And I think that's looking pretty good. If I need to do any touch-ups, I can always do that. Might fade the tops of these a little bit for a cleaner blend. But I think that's kind of the effect that I'm going for. So I'm going to go ahead and save this because I have not saved it. A reminder to save. That's always very important. And that is our double exposure effect for the first one. So that's the grayscale one. I think these work really well when you're breaking the silhouette. You can do double exposure effects in so many ways. It's really just combining two different photos or more. But I really like the double exposure effects where you're breaking up the silhouette between the two objects. It's not just an image contained within her head. We actually broke the top of her silhouette, let the trees become the silhouette, but we keep the silhouette of her face and the hair. I think that's a lot of fun. You can try this however you want. But I also like this kind of moody look that the light gray background that fades into everything gets. So what we can do next is we can try a color one. Robert says, question, what do you think of this? A hue is always a color, but a color is not always a hue. So colors are, you can break up a color a few different ways. There's hue, which is like, what color is it? Is it red, green, blue, purple? That is the hue. And then you have the saturation, which is how vibrant is that color? Is it a very muted color or is it very like bold and full saturation? And then you have value, which is how light or dark it is. So the hue slider, let me see if we can see this on my screen. Over on the right side, this slider, that's the hue. That is, is it blue, purple, green, what have you. The value is up and down, how light or dark, and the saturation is left and right. So the color, my opinion of the word color is color describes all three of those. So it's all three put together. That is what makes up the full color. But the color is made up of those three elements, if that makes sense. What's going on, Sean? Good to see you. All right, let's jump into a new design. I'm going to grab all my layers and I'm going to shift click them to select them all, press Control or Command G to group, and I'll put grayscale for this. And then what I want to do is I want to turn that off. I'll hide that. We have this this masked version. I'm going to do Control or Command J to duplicate that. I'll put it above my grayscale folder, and I'm going to apply that mask, and we'll go from there. All right, so we're going to, let me make sure I didn't miss anything. Yeah. Okay, cool. So let's grab a new layer here, a new asset from our assets folder. This time we're going to do the city image. So I'm going to Control or Command J that one, bring it down out of the folder. And then we can try right-clicking this. Actually, what I want to do is I don't want to clip it yet. I want to lower the opacity a little bit so I can visualize this and see exactly where I want to place this in the scene. Or in relation to the portrait. So I think I want this part where the sunset, where the sky meets the street, to be closer to her neck. So I'm going to put that maybe closer to her collarbone. Let's scale this up. I want this this tower to be part of the head. So I'll try something like that. I think that looks pretty good. I'm going to press Enter to confirm that placement. And then what I can do is put the opacity back to 100%, right-click that, create clipping mask, and see how that looks. All right, so that object's already, it's a smart object, so that's good. We're not going to desaturate it this time. But what I want to do is mask out part of this to show the face a bit more like we did before. This is where we're kind of blending the two effects. So I'm going to create a layer mask down at the bottom of the layers panel. Click that. And we're just going to use black to conceal that layer with, again, a large soft round brush. Again, if you're using a mask, I recommend using a lower flow to get a more gradual edge, and also a large brush size for that, nice clean gradient. So I want her face and a bit of her shoulders to be showing, a little bit of the hair too, maybe just like the edge of the hair. You can just kind of play around with that mask until you get an effect that you like. What we could do here is go onto the city layer. I'm making sure to select the city layer, not the mask. And I can go to select sky. And it should be able to select the sky, even though it's kind of hidden from us. And now what I can do is I can go into our mask, or I can go into our portrait. I guess we don't have a mask for her yet. Create a new mask. Okay, actually, let's try this again. I'm going to deselect. I'm going to select our portrait, create a mask ahead of time, go back to my city layer, select sky. If you have a selection and you make a mask, it'll apply that instantly, and that's not what we want. And then what I want to do is I want to paint black onto the portrait mask with that sky selected and just kind of blend the two here. So we get this like nice gradient where the sky flows into the background. All right, from there, what I want to do is kind of the same thing we did with the treetops on the last image, if you recall. What we can do is we can duplicate the city image, Control-Command-J. Let's actually Control-Z. I need to deselect. I hid my selection, by the way, with Control-Command-H, but I forgot that I had a selection, so Control-Command-D to deselect. Control-Command-D and Control-Command-H, I use them all the time. If you don't use those, definitely a time saver. Control-Command-D is so useful, so you don't have to click around, try to find if you have some secret selection. Very helpful. So I'm going to duplicate this layer again, and I'm going to delete the layer mask. And then I'm going to do the same thing I did with the treetops, create a new layer, fill it in with black. I'm going to use Alt or Option Backspace since I have black selected. And then I can just paint in the top of the building. I should be able to paint in the top here. But actually what I may want to do is go back, select my layer, select skin, Control-Shift-I to invert that selection. And that way I should be able to go on my mask and just paint in the tower. So now we're using that selection and just painting in this part here. All right, so I think we got our effect there. Basically, double exposure is really just a lot of playing with masking. At its very essence, you're kind of clipping one image to another and then masking out one of those images to reveal the other one. But you can go a bit further where you see that I'm duplicating the image that's clipped, and then I'm masking out everything. I'm hiding it completely, and then I'm just masking in a portion that I want to break the silhouette. So I have just that. And I realize it's a little bit messy here. I have that little corner sticking out, so I'll just paint that in black. You can zoom in as much as you need to. But this kind of creates a cool color double exposure effect. Let me group this. I'm going to do Control-Command-G, and we'll call this color. Save it. Remember to save. Control-Command-S is the other very useful hotkey to have. But now we have our two effects. We have this kind of nature-themed one, and we have this city-themed one with some more bold colors. So we have grayscale and we have color. A lot of different ways you can go about these. If you haven't seen these effects before, I would recommend Googling double exposure effects to kind of get an idea of like what type of effects it's even creating. But these are a couple. Hopefully this gives you a good idea of techniques and ideas you can play with, ways you can approach this, and things you can do with it. And I'm definitely interested in seeing your designs in the Discord. So if anyone doesn't know, we do have a Discord community, and this is where everyone's posting the designs they do for these challenges. I give feedback as a mentor. We have other mentors. We got Ted. A lot of people give feedback as well. We have community members who are giving feedback, and it's always nice to give feedback as well if you see something and you want to leave someone a comment. But you can see everything everyone's been doing. Great job, by the way. We have some really cool designs. Frank and Daniel are killing it. Daniel's got the time lapses going on if anyone hasn't seen those yet. So definitely check this out. This is the DCC feedback section of the Discord. We also have an Ask a Question section. A lot of different sections if you haven't checked out the community. I definitely recommend it. Thanks so much for joining me today, everybody. I really do appreciate it. I will be back next time. Have a good one, everyone.